Southwest Fire Academy was established in 2015 as a response to the recognized need for quality, safe, and affordable fire and rescue training in Ontario. This is not your average fire college. SFA has high standards for their students, and it is their mission to teach and produce qualified, ambitious firefighters who are prepared to work hard to serve their communities. This is not a diploma mill. This is where you can learn strategic, aggressive firefighting from passionate, intelligent instructors who never forget why they were made to do this job. SFA is an accredited private career college that is regulated by the Ministry of Training, colleges, and universities, with a memorandum of understanding with the Office of the Fire Marshal. This means that SFA is an approved training provider with the OFM, and the programs are recognized in Ontario. Check out their pre-service and expanding selection of course offerings at southwestfireacademy.ca. Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 110 of Multiple Calls. I'm Scott Hewlett. There are categories of awareness that are important for personal and professional development. Awareness is part of our fire vernacular, as in awareness level training, but we tend to talk about the official types more indirectly. The leaders in the fire service highlight humility, which is part of self-awareness, arguably the most important of the list. The kitchen table and camaraderie is a close second when speaking to the need for social awareness, and environmental awareness, which we call situational. Time awareness, one that is challenged under the high-stress stimulation overload moments we are thrown into, including the sensory deprivation of being fully encapsulated in a limited to no visibility space. Workspace awareness, which is crucial given the dynamic nature of emergency incidents. And emotional awareness, which to our credit as a service we are starting to get a better handle on, for our own benefit and that of everyone we encounter on and off the job. Although imposing routine, structure, habits, and knowns on ourselves, our days, and our operations, for some sense of stability and predictability through our careers, is valuable on many levels, but we can also have the habit of remaining flexible, and these awarenesses are key to that. Who am I? What's my place and role? Where should I focus my growth and learning currently? What barriers are there within and around me that I need to navigate? And how can I best be of service to myself and to others to help promote health and longevity on the micro and macro? Here's my chat with Jacob Hillhouse. Kick off by telling me where you grew up and tell me a bit about your family growing up.
I come from a military family. My parents are originally from Oklahoma, and they got in the military. My dad did, and they moved around from California, where they had my two sisters, and then they moved to D.C., where I came along. 7-8 months after I was born, we moved to San Antonio, Texas, and that's where we kind of put down our roots. We were stationed on Fort Sam Houston. It's kind of military city, USA, San Antonio. The first 8 years of my life was military growing up. My dad was deployed a couple times, and I was predominantly kind of raised by my mother in the military. He was gone a lot. After 8 years or so there, my dad retired from the military, and we ended up just staying in the San Antonio area. We moved just out to the suburbs in Schertz, Texas. It's right on the I-35 corridor between Austin and San Antonio. From there, my parents ended up kind of separating and getting a divorce. From that point, I was kind of raised predominantly by my mother. My dad ended up finding a wife who was in California, and he was here in Austin, but he was back and forth. And so it was my mom who predominantly raised me from that point on. My two sisters, my mom, they kind of helped raise me. I'm the youngest of the three kids. I was always the little sweetheart that never did any wrong. That was kind of growing up. I want to tell you a little bit about now. Right now, I'm very blessed with my family. I have an amazing wife named Kayla. We've been married 7 years. October of this year will be 7 years. I have two kids. Brooks, who's 4 years old. He's my little rock star boy. And then I have my daughter, Stella, who's 2. They're my world right now. One thing I always push in the fire service is family. Family, at a very young age was really big with me. My mom was very compassionate and loving and just an all-around great mom. I'm a firm believer that growing up, especially as a boy, there's a masculine figure that you kind of want around the house to kind of teach a lot of accountability and responsibility and just certain traits that it wasn't her realm. As I began to get older in my teenage years, I definitely lacked on that. Like I said, my dad was around some, but predominantly being raised by my mother, I felt like I missed out on some of those things. As I got in high school, I did play sports. I played basketball and football. As things began to get kind of tough as I grew up and got to like JV and varsity in school, I ended up getting cut from the team. I really didn't care. It was like, just something that I tried. Oh, well, I'm going to move on to the next thing. I never really was exposed to a lot of hard times growing up and having, like I said, that accountability.
Like, how was school for you?
It was satisfactory. I never really stood out. I ended up failing like my junior year math class. It was just enough to get by. And that's kind of how I viewed most of school. I was never really a fan of it. I skipped a lot of days. And I remember my mom, even growing up in my high school year, saying, man, I'm worried about you because you just don't really seem to have a sense of purpose. That scared me, of course. One thing that I was real big with was being a millennial was video games. A lot of hobbies that wasn't very pertinent to growing as an individual. That was, in a nutshell, kind of growing up. My two sisters, one's 4 years older than me and one's 7 years older than me. I was picked on a lot from them, but we had a pretty good relationship growing up. They're both local in the area where I reside now, so we're pretty close.
What jobs were you working before you got on the fire service?
Before I got in the fire service, I worked with a buddy who he went to high school with me, and he owned a little lawn mowing company. We mowed lawns together for about 2 years, and that was a pretty humbling job, a lot of hard work, a lot of long days. Summer here in South Texas, when you're working 12-hour days, can be pretty brutal. I did that for a little while, and we actually started mowing lawns for a guy who was a contractor. He liked our work ethic, and he actually let us kind of come on to some of his job sites and oversee some of the guys that worked for him. Obviously, we knew nothing about contracting, but he saw that we had good morals and values and that we were trustworthy. So we were just another set of eyes for him, and then we did some, cleanup work. And he had a pretty cool story. He had connections with people in San Antonio who owned the Ferrari and Maserati dealerships. So he actually did contracting work there. So being a 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid and being able to go to some of these cool dealerships and seeing these $200,000-$300,000 cars was a pretty cool experience. And just lets you know that, you work hard, maybe one day. He was such a meticulous individual. He was very successful in his contracting business. And it was because of the relationship that he built with people and the way he interacted with them. I remember he always locked eyes with people when he talked to them. In today's society, people are so afraid to lock eyes and actually communicate. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable these days. And he was that type of guy, just very genuine. And that was something that always stuck with him.
So what was the first exposure to the fire service? What brought it on your radar?
Yeah, so my oldest sister, Ashley, her husband at the time was her boyfriend. He was actually a firefighter. Ironically, I love to share this story with people, but ironically, to me, the fire service was just a cool job that we could go to work, hang out with the boys, run some calls, and then you could kind of hang out the rest of the day and not really do too much, right? That was, with my mentality in high school, wanting to just do the bare minimum. I was like, you know what, this would be a pretty cool job for me, right? That was the initial kind of toe in the water. From there, the department I actually work out now, Cibolo, they had volunteers at the time. They had Thursday night trainings. And so when I was a junior in high school, I think I was 16 years old, I started coming up to the fire station, hanging out with the guys, doing the trainings that they had. I fell in love with the camaraderie. I fell in love with the brotherhood, the servant leadership. The training chief at the time, who was in charge of the volunteers, he's actually the fire chief now. And at the time, his name is Mario Troncoso. He was a captain at Selma, which is a neighboring fire department around this area. He's a fireman's chief. He was very progressive, open-minded, not afraid to teach people the correct ways of doing things and no filter. It was a really good way to kind of get exposed to the fire service.
But you mentioned to me that things kind of took a 180-degree turn for you when you entered the service. So why don't you walk me through how you ended up getting on?
The real change in my mindset of being a firefighter actually took place when I promoted. I got hired. First off, I did all my certifications here in Texas, We have to go to EMT school for 6 months, and then we have to go to a structural fire academy. Those two certifications together, then you can get your Texas Commission on Fire Protection certification. I got hired right away part-time at Cibolo, so I was able to start getting exposure pretty early, on. After a year of doing that, I was able to get brought on as a full-timer. My first crew, I had a very, very autocratic old school lieutenant. He's an amazing guy, but just different generation. It was pretty challenging for me from being raised from a single mom for a little while with all the compassion and care. It was a huge culture shock to have someone like that who was very stern, and when you would mess up, he would just kind of chew you out. It was important though. I had to be exposed to people like that in different generations. That was pretty interesting. As I continued in my career, at about the 4-year mark, let me back up. So Cibolo, where I work, we have currently 3 fire stations. We're about to open our 4th. At the time, we had 2. Our chain of command, we had Station 1 and Station 2, and we had a lieutenant at Station 1 who oversaw the whole shift. At Station 1, there was a lieutenant, and then they had 2 firefighters. And then at Station 2, they had 3 firefighters, and one of the firefighters was considered a firefighter in charge. So basically, they were a lieutenant, but they didn't have the actual full job description. Of course, we had our fire chief, and that was really the only chain of command we had. At around the 4-year mark, I ended up moving to a different shift, and I was at Station 2 working under a firefighter in charge. Up to that point, my 4 years in, I did the minimum. I was a pretty good firefighter. I cared about the job. I liked to go to trainings, but back then, 2015, 2016, the fire service, at least in the San Antonio area, wasn't what it is today, right? We didn't have the conferences. We didn't have the camaraderie. We didn't have the why, all the UL studies and the firefighter rescue survey data. None of that was really there. It was just kind of like the structural academy curriculum, and that was kind of like the training and what we did, right? And so I felt pretty confident at the job. At that 4-year mark, I remember the day like it was yesterday. I usually drove for that firefighter in charge. I was kind of the unofficial driver. I never rode the seat up to that point. I never rode in the officer seat. And that firefighter in charge called in sick. And my lieutenant told me, hey, we can't find coverage today. You're going to have to step up in that seat. And I was scared to death. I was like, oh man, something's going to happen. Had the shift. We ran a couple calls. I remember a vehicle fire going off and being so scared going there, but we did a great job when it was all said and done. And it was good. It was a good shift. It gave me a little bit of confidence. And then the next shift came around. That firefighter in charge ended up calling it again. So my lieutenant said, hey, you're riding the seat again. And another pretty good shift, nothing too crazy, ended up popping off. But ironically, after those 2 shifts, my lieutenant, I guess, saw something in me, and he actually did some movement on the crew, and I was actually put as a firefighter in charge a couple of days after that. Basically being in that lieutenant role informally, being in my early to mid-20s, lack of personal experiences, lack of fire service experiences. At the time, I was confident, but now looking back, I didn't know what I was getting into, right? It was very humbling for me because when I got on that FFIC position, you look back in that fire truck and you see those people that you're responsible for. It was a pretty scary thing for someone at my age. But I felt that days were a lot more productive. We would get out and we would train more. A couple months later, the city actually secured funding for 3 more lieutenant positions to where we would be able to have a formal company officer at our Station 1 and 2. And I remember the fire chief actually coming up to me and saying, hey, I want you to go for that position. At the time, I really wasn't even considering it. I still felt very young in where I was as a firefighter, and I wanted more tailboard time and more time driving. But I look at other people in the job, right? The passion that I have and what I felt like I brought to the table. And yeah, I might have not had the experience. I might have not had the education compared to some people, but I had the drive and I had a true passion for the job. So I told myself, you know what? I think I can do this job better than some of the other people who are going for this position. So I'm going to throw my name. I ended up applying for the position. We had 4 people that went for it, and we had 3 positions that opened. The promotional process at the time was pretty straightforward. Cibolo Fire Department, we're still in our infancy. It's a full-time department, but it started in 2009. So still in the baby stage, right? The process was a written test followed by oral interviews with the lieutenants at the time who were in that position. and then the assistant chiefs, and then the fire chief. So the process ended, and I actually scored the highest on that, which I was very, very shocked to find out. But yeah, I ended up scoring the highest, and I was appointed to a lieutenant. That was in 2019. Yeah, I was right around my mid-20s. Now it's the formal responsibility of the people that you have to lead. You just do this like self-realization on everything, right? Like, first off, Cibolo, the city that I work for, the neighboring city is Schertz, and that's where my family lives. One thing cool about both these neighboring cities is we do a proximity agreement to where we have GPS in all of our apparatus. Our city limits are so intertwined with each other that whenever a call is pinged from a dispatcher, the closest unit takes the call, right? And Schertz and Cibolo is probably two of the biggest suburbs of the San Antonio Metrocom. That's kind of the area we call it. I was actually going to be second due to my house at that point. So you start kind of just having this whole new realization of what the job is and what it entails, the people you're responsible for, but more importantly, the citizens you're responsible for, right? So at that point, I kind of took a vow to myself that I'm going to dive into the job head first. I'm going to try to learn as much as I can. I'm going to try to put myself out there and be uncomfortable and just gather as much as I can. I don't have the experience yet. That will come in time, but I'm going to try to get the education and build the confidence in my skill sets, right? One of the first things that I began to get a passion for was hose and nozzles. And my organization at that time ran Eco 10 hose with 100 PSI variable gallon fog nozzles. You're on social media and you're looking at all these guys who are in parking lots flowing water, and it looks easy, right? And you're like, man, like what are they doing, right? Like how is it so easy? Because the setup that we have is not working. At that time, I didn't even know there was different hose. I didn't know that hose and nozzles paired together. I didn't know any of that stuff, right? So I started diving into key hose and finding out that there's different models and what's True ID and what's Eco and what's all these different types. And now I'm like, okay, well now there's nozzles that pair with that, and there's low pressure and high pressure. And I start finding names like Dennis Laguerre, right, and Kyle Romagus and all these big names in the fire service. I start diving into webinars, and this was kind of right around when COVID was taking off. So the little conference webinars was kind of becoming a big thing. So diving into that aspect, and I was starting to learn so much about all that. Right around that time is when our fire chief retired, and our current fire chief, Mario Troncoso, he left Selma and came over as our fire chief. And like I said, he's a fireman's chief. He listens to the guys, and he took what we said very valuable, right? And that was one thing that I brought up to him was, hey, chief, like we need new hose and nozzles. We want to be able to utilize some of these new techniques. I brought up the UL studies with him and flowing and moving and surface cooling and gas cooling and getting into all that stuff with him. And I remember he told me, because man, you're a nerd on this and I love it. You're a guy that cares about the job and you're passionate about it. He was able to secure funding for us to get all new hose and nozzles. We ended up getting Combat Sniper hose. We went with 7/8 smoothbore tips through Elkhart, 2.5. It was right before 2 1/4 kind of took off. So we ended up getting 2.5 with 1 3/16 smoothbore tip. So it was a huge win for the firefighters, right? And so we were able to acquire all that stuff and start flowing water confidently. It was pretty cool to say that I had a lot of pull in that, which was really awesome. In regards to that was one big project that I kind of helped take on, and getting out there with conferences. One thing that I love about the San Antonio area is we are stacked with talent in this area. I know Manny Morales has been on your show a couple times. That guy's a stud. I got to meet him, and he actually invited me on the MV first line cadre. So I taught with that for a little while. Guys in San Antonio like Daniel Dury with his search stuff is awesome. Out here kind of in the Metrocom area, you had Kevin Pfluger and Tom Hollick, which I'm going to talk about him in a little bit. All these guys who are just studs on the job, right? Seeing these people around you just makes you want to be better. I remember seeing Tom Hollick for the first time and his passion for the job, and I was like, man, that's a guy that I want to be like, right? Getting around those people and trying to become more like them and learn from them, and that really kind of helped me grow as a company officer.
Yeah, so dive into tell me about Tom and how you got connected with him and how he's been a real guide and mentor to you.
He's one of our battalion chiefs at Cibolo now for the C shift. I actually had my first exposure with him when he was a company officer at Schertz. Hats off to him. He noticed a huge, deficiency in our area with RIT. Whenever we would get all of our companies on scene from all the small departments, RIT was basically, oh, you're assigned RIT. I'm going to go sit on the curb now and just kind of wait if something happens, right? And that was what RIT was. And he saw that deficiency in our area. He pulled a lot of the NFPA stuff for RIT, and he ended up creating a curriculum for our area. It's called CISO, Combined Emergency Service Organizations, all the mutual aid departments and how we kind of conduct training together. And so he created a RIT curriculum for CISO and started teaching that for all the departments. That was the first exposure I had to him, what was in that RIT class. And I don't even think I might have just been promoted to lieutenant, or it was right before where I met him. Tom Hollick is 6'4", very intimidating person, right? Very knowledgeable. And he walked in the room and he gave his lecture over RIT, his mindset, how he's able to like break down everything on like a Scott RIT pack, and the length of the hoses on the RIT pack, and everything on your SCBA. And that separates a professional fireman to a regular fireman, right? Is knowing your weapons, knowing your tools that you use. And he displayed all that in that lecture, and it was just mind-blowing to me. I'm like, how have I been in the service for 4 years, and I don't even know this stuff about my SCBA, and that's my lifeline? Hearing it from him, it was just jaw-dropping, right? Took that class, loved it. It was a great hands-on class. We learned everything from the Pittsburgh drill and Denver drill to high-angle pulley rope, removing a down firefighter from a window. Just really cool techniques, and it was the first exposure I had to any of that. The class ended, and I ended up finding out that Tom was moved to a station in Schertz right next to Cibolo. So he was kind of my neighboring station, but in the different city. And we ended up kind of getting together and talking about what's expectations of you coming into our city and vice versa. And every time we met with them, we were just always learning something new, like all these new nuggets. And it got to a point to where every shift we were going to go train with Schertz Engine 2, because those guys were really knowledgeable, and we were getting outside of our bubble, and we were learning new things. I remember in my organization at the time, people were actually making fun of me and the crew for doing that. Oh, you need to stay in your organization. Are you trying to be, a Schertz fire station and stuff like that? But it didn't get me down, because the amount of stuff that we were learning was amazing. Years went by, and I ended up moving to a different shift. And me and Tom, we had a great relationship from that point on. He actually invited me to kind of help teach the RIT class. So I hopped on that and had a lot of amazing opportunities to go out and teach around the South Texas area to all these departments with RIT. Tom actually, he lives in the city of Cibolo. He's got a pretty cool setup at his house. He's got a big barn with a TV, and the guy is really family oriented and department oriented, and people know that, hey, the boys are all going over to Tom's house to hang out, right? He just has that mentality with his people, which is really cool. And so had a lot of nights spent with him talking shop in his barn, which is really, really cool. Our department, we ended up getting battalion chiefs about 2.5 years ago. I remember him texting me and being like, hey, I'm throwing my name in the hat for it. And I was like, awesome, man, that would be a great opportunity for you. And he ended up getting it. Now, like I said, he's on the C shift over at Cibolo with us, and he's doing amazing, amazing things for us in that shift over there.
Tell me about Eddie Gonzalez, and you talked about in your write-up about soft leadership skills.
I got a lot of mentors. I want to get into a couple of them. Eddie Gonzalez is one. He would probably be shocked that I was talking to him about this, because I don't think he realized the impact he had on me. Soft leadership skills is something that I feel that we're lacking in the fire service, but we're getting better at it, at least in this area. Corley Moore, in his book, The 9 L's, he talks about soft leadership skills, and it's the actual emotional connections you can have with your people, right? Like actually getting to know them and having a good relationship and knowing what drives them and having those difficult conversations and loving them, right? All those things. And Eddie Gonzalez really, really showed a lot of those to me in kind of a difficult time of my life. As a young kid, right, you hopefully don't have a lot of hardships that you have to deal with loss of family or medical diagnoses and stuff like that. And of course, as you get older, you're going to start acquiring some of those situations, right? And Eddie had some of those trials and tribulations in his life. So I think he learned some of those soft leadership skills kind of early on. Like I said, I have 2 kids. My oldest is Brooks. He's 4. When me and my wife found out that we were pregnant, We found out we were having a boy. We were so excited. First thing I'm thinking of, right, is, oh man, I could have a son that's going to follow my footsteps, and I can't wait to go to his sports games and do this and do that. All these great things you start thinking about, right? I remember my wife had hypertension issues, so she had to go to see a specialist for OB, and we had to go do an ultrasound one day when she was probably about 3 months pregnant. We remember, sitting in the room. They're doing the ultrasound, and they have the little TV screen right there, and they're showing you everything. And the ultrasound tech sees something, and her whole body language changes. And my wife is actually a labor and delivery nurse, so she kind of saw something too, but she didn't know. And so the ultrasound tech says, "Hey, I'm going to go get the doctor." My wife looks at me and she says, "Hey, there's something on the spine that I'm seeing there. I don't know what it is, but I wonder if it's like spinal bifida or something." And I'm a very positive person. That's how I've always been, and I always strive to be. And I said, "Well, hey, let's just wait and see. Let's not jump to conclusions." I didn't know anything about spinal bifida at that point. The doctor then comes in and sits down with us and says, "Hey, I just want to let you guys know that it looks like your child here, it has a form of spinal bifida." This isn't a neurospecialist or anything. This is just an OB doctor, and so that they have a very broad knowledge of this. And he said, with spinal bifida, there's chances of wheelchair bound for life and issues with bowel and bladder and all these things. And huge culture shock, right? We were going to this appointment to get cute little photos of the baby for the first time in an ultrasound, and we're leaving with this news. And now everything changes in our mind. How is this going to affect life, and what's this going to do for us? And I'm a pretty emotional guy. The guys I work with and people that know me, I'm an emotional guy. I think a lot of that is because being raised by a single mom. I used to think it was a lacking negative trait, but now I know it's actually a really positive trait as I've gotten older. But I remember going to work wanting to tell the guys about what happened, because we were going to have to go to Houston to see a neurospecialist. And I ended up breaking down and kind of crying in front of a couple of the guys. And Eddie Gonzalez was one of them. They gave me a hug and said, "Hey, man, anything you need, we're here for you, all right?" I remember being embarrassed and ashamed for crying in front of them like that. After we went to Houston for that appointment, we ended up having to have some surgeries with my son. And I remember Eddie being there texting me every step of the way. That reinforcement of caring for someone, if you just tell someone, "Hey, I care, and if you need help, let me know," those are words, right? But when you're actually showing it by those actions, and he would text me on the daily, I didn't realize the value of that and how much I actually needed that in the moment. That guy taught me a lot about soft leadership skills that I really, he has them dialed in, and I strive to be like that individual. He's a stud. He's a really good fireman. He's a lieutenant as well at Cibolo, but he's a really good mentor of mine. Another one, this is my boy. His name's Harold Melton. He's actually my battalion chief. He is an amazing individual. He has mastered these soft leadership skills too. He's very, very good at communicating with people. He was actually one of my fire service instructors in the academy. What I love about him is he is the light of the room anytime he walks in the room. He's always funny. He's always cracking jokes. And when it comes time to get serious and teach a curriculum to someone, or he's on the job, the dude is dialed in 100%. He just can switch it off and on so well. We all need humor in the fire service, and he's mastered that, but just seeing how he can flip it on and off is amazing. He was my instructor in their fire academy. Whenever I got hired at Cibolo, he was always kind of a mentor of mine. When I promoted to lieutenant, he was actually my counterpart. He was a lieutenant at Station 1 when I was a lieutenant at Station 2. He has older boys. Him and his wife have been married a while, so he was just a really cool guy to kind of see. He had all these life achievements, and I always told myself, man, I want to be like that guy. When the battalion chief process opened up, like I said, 2.5 years ago, he applied for that. He obtained that position for the B shift. So that's my boss. That's my dude. He's an amazing, amazing guy.
How have you balanced instructing in family and work? Maybe just expand on that for me.
I actually struggled with it pretty hardcore, especially the traveling and teaching. One thing that I always tell people, coming from a divorced household, I don't want to be a statistic with the fire service being the way it is, right? I don't want my relationship to end in divorce. I don't want my kids to have to deal with that. With the job, we run a 48-96 shift cycle. We have the 4 days off, but when you start getting into teaching, The company that I taught with, MV Fire Rescue, it was getting pretty popular. We were having classes all the time down in like the valley in South Texas by the Rio Grande, up in North Texas, West Texas. It was getting pretty popular. Of course, some of the classes were falling on my 4 days off, so I would work my 2 days, go to a class for 4 days, go back on shift. My wife was still a nurse working her 3 shifts a week or 2 shifts a week, and then also trying to raise one child, then getting pregnant with another. It started becoming tough for us. I had to make the decision to basically kind of stop teaching and traveling and doing that just for the sake of my family. I hated doing it because I love the camaraderie. I loved getting out there and teaching. It was so cool to just get out there and have that impact on various areas of the fire service. I remember going to one department for RIT, and those guys, like, RIT for them was like a toolbox. And that's what RIT was. They didn't have RIT packs or any of that stuff. And being able to bring all this to them and completely change their mindset on RIT and being proactive, doing the secondary 360s and firefighter down CPR and just all the various aspects of it. It's cool to change that culture, because you change that culture in one department in a geographical area and it's going to grow just like a wildfire. It was really cool to be a part of a lot of that stuff. But I mean, I remember even calling Tom and telling him, hey man, I gotta take a step back. And I also had to tell Manny that too, with the first line cadre. And of course they understood. They're family men, they know. I felt like I let them down, but at the end of the day, family's got to come first. So I had to make that decision. But while I did it, I was super fortunate. I loved it. And it was a really cool opportunity.
How are you translating that family first mentality to your crew and the people you're around at work while you are at work?
It's so huge. When I promoted to a company officer, I was all about the skill sets. My first probably 1 to 2 years, I wanted the guys to be good. I wanted them to stretch lines good and flow and move, and I wanted us to be known as that crew, right? I think that I negated a lot of those family first qualities initially. And then, when stuff started happening with my son with the spinal bifida and started just learning more about myself and getting more life experiences, I realized that the crews that I were on, we were good at our job, but the trust might not have been there because of that lack of that family mentality. And what I mean by that is just showing your people that you actually care about them, right? Telling them that, you love them and you care and you want goals and dreams and aspirations for them. One thing I'm real big with now is when a firefighter comes to work with me, they have their goals, right? And usually they're not going to just tell you, hey, these are my goals and I want you to try to help me meet them, right? You kind of have to pull them out of them. So now whenever a guy works with me, they get a piece of paper that has short-term goals and long-term goals. And I sat down with them and I said, hey, in my position as a leader, all I'm here to do is to make you be the very best that you can be. So what I want you to do is I want you to create these goals so that can give me a vision of where you want to be. And in my position, I'm going to do whatever I can to help get you there, right? That's one big thing. Another thing is just getting family involved in general. I try to really push a family aspect on everything that we do, right? Having our personal families up to the stations, eating together. One thing I love to see, the crew I'm with now, I'm going to name drop them. David Tay's my driver. I got David Beck, who's one of the tailboard firefighters, and then another new guy named Miles Bentz. We all have young kids, and we'll have family dinners at the firehouse, and we have a little container of toys in our day room for kids when they come up. And one of the coolest things to see that I love is after we eat dinner, all the kids go in the day room and they pull out the toys, and all these firefighters are getting on the ground, crisscross, playing with each other's kids. I mean, that's family. That's what we need to be striving to do in the fire service, is stuff like that. And I mean, every time I see that, it just puts a huge smile on my face. Doing stuff like that, getting together outside of work is another huge thing that I'm a real big proponent of. Trying to have game nights, having a weekend getaway. We have a pretty cool little small town about an hour from here called Fredericksburg. It's a little wine country town. We'll rent an Airbnb there for the whole shift and just go out and hang out together and fellowship and have a good old time. One thing that I absolutely love doing with the guys is bumper talk. Instead of watching a movie inside, go out on the bumper and exchange dialogue. Talk about things that are going on in your personal lives and getting those different perspectives from those individuals. And you start learning some real deep stuff about guys, and they open up, and doing that reinforces that relationship. When you have that relationship with your people and they truly know that you care and you're not in it for the title, you're in it because you care and you want to help them, it changes everything. I mean, the level of trust, they'll go to the ends of the world for you because they know that you have their best interest at heart.
With that trust and vulnerability, with these deep connections, friendships, family, like true brotherhood, how do you find that translates then to how you care for citizens when you go on calls?
I'm second due to my house. Everything. The citizens come first, right? And that's one thing I'll get into now is expectations. When firefighters start with me, before they even get their goal list, they get a list of pretty precise expectations on what they're expected to do on the job. It's all for the citizens. The skill sets that we do, progressive mindset that we have, the physical capabilities, everything is to provide the absolute best service to the citizens that we serve. And I'll get into expectations is, as an initial company officer, I had my own expectations in my head, right, of what I wanted people to do and to be, right? I would give guys a little broad sheet of formal leadership traits. Hey, I want you to express these and do these things, but they're broad. It's not down and dirty on, hey, I want you to be able to stretch a line within 60 seconds of getting off the truck. I want you to mask up within 20 seconds. I want you to throw a ladder and occupy the interior space on a window-initiated search within 2 minutes of air brakes hitting, right? Stuff like that. And so I began to judge people based off of these lack of expectations because I never put them on paper. So I sat down with my crew one day and I said, hey guys, I said, we want to do the very best for the citizens we serve. Of course, we all agree 100%. And I said, we need to put on paper goals that we want to strive to do and to be to deliver the very, very best service to the citizens of Cibolo, right? And so we did. We ended up creating this very long, extensive list of expectations. From the outside looking in, it almost looks a little micromanaging, but when I can pitch it to people and tell them why we do it the way we do it, they get it. The cool thing about it is the expectations that we set forth. I don't just say, hey, this is what I expect from you, do it, right? I have expectations, or we have expectations for every single position on our fire truck. So the expectations are there for the firefighter, they're there for the engineer, and they're there for the lieutenant. And one thing I tell them is, hey, I said, we are all holding each other accountable. And if I'm failing in my position, I expect you to call me out just as much as if you're failing in your position, I'm going to call you out, right? Those expectations there, the mindset and the accountability just changed drastically. Going back to trust, it started becoming okay calling each other out and hey man, that was a 23-second mask up time, or you're averaging a 23-second mask up time. You need to dial that in, man. That's not good enough. That's not the standard that we set forth, right? I got you, man. You're right. Going back to the citizens that we serve, it just sets that precedence of what matters and how we need to be approaching this job.
What about the translation, I guess, of the softer side that you're obviously all very comfortable with, and it's not very common in the service, and I think it's more common in the service for firefighters. I think they need to put a barrier between themselves and the people that they help, because otherwise they won't be able to do their job. Maybe just talk to me about how you guys approach that.
I think one thing is vulnerability. I have to show in my actions that I can be vulnerable and open up to people. And in turn, I think they'll feel a lot more safe in doing that as well. Anything that happens in my personal life that I feel like I need some guidance from, and if I feel the guys can offer that, I get that from them, right? My guys have seen me emotional. They've seen trials and tribulations that I've had to endure. It creates almost like a safe place for them. They realize, hey, if he's willing to do this, I'm willing to do this, right? For me, it's just having those expectations, living by those, opening up, having those conversations with people. How do you start that dialogue, right? And one thing that has been a huge impact for our crew is we have a book club. On this book club, we read various books. Some of them can be leadership based, and then some of them can be fire service based. I'm not a reader. I've never really been a big fan of reading, but as I've gotten older, I've seen the value in it. What I love about it is we read usually a chapter on our off day, and then when we come into work, we go over it together. We're 48, 96. So on day 2 in the morning, when we wake up, we'll have some coffee and we'll talk about that chapter together. And it's so cool to see the different perceptions of how David interpreted that compared to how I interpreted it. A lot of leadership books shows those soft leadership skills. that just starts the dialogue, right? That's the hardest thing for firefighters, is starting the dialogue on soft leadership skills. How can I be better at this? One author that I love is Simon Sinek. He's a real big leadership-based author. He's very corporate world driven. He talks a lot about the corporate world, but it translates to us, and it's all about caring for your people, loving your people. I use that word a lot. I love my people, and I know that word can frighten people in the fire service, right? It's huge, because if you love your people and you show them that you care on all those aspects, again, they're gonna do whatever they can to help not only you succeed, but help the crew succeed.
Do you find that the difficult calls perhaps are more impactful to them, and how do you guys process that as a crew?
The calls that we go on, that obviously mental health is so big in the fire service right now. I don't want to get into it too crazy, but we actually, in our organization, we lost a member a couple months ago. It's hard. Any way you look at it, it's hard, right? But having these relationships with your people, and I want to applaud not only my crew, but our whole organizations like this. We all have that mentality of, it's okay to open up to people and talk. It makes it a lot easier when you can talk to these people, because of course, old school fireman mentality, right, is, bottle it all up and we don't need to talk about it and this and that. But no, it's healthy to talk about it. It's healthy to talk about the things that you're going through, how you're processing it. It's super, super important.
With the high expectations, a strong skill set, the compassion you guys bring to the calls, do you find it's easier to process hard things because you can take the good that you did on those calls forward, and not necessarily to be stuck with regret or guilt or things that are misplaced? You've owned your responsibility for the call, and you did a good job, whether the outcome was what you wanted it to be or not.
We're real big on having after actions too, talking about how we conducted ourselves on the calls. But yeah, I think it's so important to have hobbies and things outside of work. But one thing that I also love about our organization is idle time is the devil's time, right? If you're just sitting around not doing very much, that's when people can get kind of down on themselves. And I love to keep a pretty busy schedule on what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I kind of think that helps with a lot of that mental aspect as well. This will kind of get into doing hard things together. If we're so busy doing hard things around the house, working out together, doing ice baths together, we're fortifying our mind doing things like that, right? I think a lot of that stuff also just helps kind of strengthen that mindset with mental health and everything. And again, doing stuff together outside of work is so important. If you notice guys are having a hard day and maybe something's off on their off time, talk to them about it and say, hey man, I know you're into competitive shooting at the gun range, right? After we get off shift, you want to go out and do things that you enjoy to do. That's one thing that I always try to say too, is you want to care for your people, but also try to enjoy things that they want to do. If we can get outside of work and get your mind off of that, I mean, I'm all about it too.
So do you feel this culture that's been built within your department, are you attracting and drawing in people that are sort of already aligned with that? Or is there a struggle to bring people up to speed? How is the recruitment and educating people on how you operate?
So when I started at Cibolo, just kind of talking about the history of our fire department, we were founded in 1956 as a volunteer department. We were volunteer all the way up till around 2009 when we went full time. I ended up coming in around 2014, 2015, and the department overall, again, was just kind of a stepping stone fire department. The pay wasn't as competitive as some of the bigger cities in the area. So when good guys would come, they would end up getting trained up a little bit, and then they would take off to the bigger city. As we've evolved as an organization, our population has grown, our department has grown. We're about to break ground on our 4th station right now. And most importantly, our culture has grown. With the culture growing and becoming this mentality, the citizens first, and we're going to teach you the why of the job, and you're going to have a fun time when you're here. You're going to be good at your job. It started to show in the area. We're no longer getting stepping stone firemen. We're getting firemen that come into the job and wanting to stay here. One thing that's really cool that I love is, again, San Antonio is Military City, USA. We have Lackland Air Force Base about 40 miles, 35 miles on the other side of San Antonio. And that is the home of Air Force basic training. Another thing that they do there is they do the pararescue special operations school for the PJs for the Air Force. Those are the guys that are paramedics and helicopters, and they're flying into combat zones and dropping in and stabilizing down soldiers and then, putting them on the bird and taking them back to a hospital. So these guys are going through school over there at Lackland, and they're actually coming out to the EMS agencies in the area, and they're doing ride-outs with the EMS crews. We contract out our EMS service with Schertz EMS. So we have their boxes in our stations. And so we have these students that come in and they kind of hang out with us throughout the day. And it's pretty cool when you get compliments from those guys saying like, man, like you guys have it dialed in. Like y'all's culture is awesome. Y'all all enjoy coming to work. One thing that we do a lot of, and firemen will make fun of this, is yoga. On our day 2, a lot of mornings we'll wake up, we all have our yoga mats, and we'll go hang out in front of the TV, and we'll do 20, 30 minutes of yoga if we have some time. And so for all the macho men out there, when we were at one of our stations doing this with an EMS crew, there were some PJs there, and they were like, hey, like, you cool if we go and hop in with y'all? They got in with their duty boots and uniform on, and they did yoga with us for 25, 30 minutes. So just little things like that. It's kind of cool to see that our culture is something that's growing, it's strong, and that seed's planted, it's growing. It can only grow more rich and strong from there.
What are your plans for promoting in the future?
For me personally, I'm 30 years old. I feel like I have a lot more to offer as a company officer. I like to say that I'm pretty confident in my education, but again, there's always more to learn. I'm an engine guy. I'm starting to kind of dive into truck culture. There's so much more I can learn on that avenue. But the experience, I want to try to acquire a lot more experience in my position before I try to seek any type of further promotion. The Cibolo Schertz area 15 years ago had a population of probably 15, 20,000. And now we're approaching, in Cibolo, about 40,000, and in Schertz about 45,000. So combined between both cities, right around 85,000 people. And then we have I-10 and I-35, 2 major thoroughfares that run through the United States. So we have a daytime population of 100,000 now, right? Our call volume has shown that over these years. This corridor between San Antonio and Austin is just booming with everything going on. I love it. I want to be able to acquire a lot more experience. I don't ever see myself getting out of operations. I love operations, being there with the guys and the camaraderie. For what the future, at least for the next 10 to 15 years, as long as my body holds out, I'm definitely going to stay in this company officer role and just continue to try to inspire people and help people grow and be the very best firefighters, but also in their personal lives, helping them out on any aspect of their life. That's one thing I also kind of wanted to talk about is growing up and not really having my dad around a lot. When I got in the fire service, it was a culture shock, right? And if I would have had more of that masculine mentality growing up, I felt like I could have been a little further ahead when I entered the fire service. That being said, now what I know, I'm going to have guys that enter the job at 20 years old who might not know how to change a tire or check oil or do a lot of those things, being able to teach them those things. And then as they get in relationships, right, providing them with good, proactive, progressive, constructive criticism on, hey, how to find a good relationship and how to stay away from nasty coping habits with the things that we see, right? And raising kids. Like I said, a lot of our bumper talk with the crew I'm with now is what are we doing raising our kids? Like, how can we raise our kids better? Hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing this. And well, this is what I'm doing. And again, as an informal leader or a formal leader, we should try to be making everyone around us better in every way possible. Because when you make people better and you give them a sense of purpose and they feel like they have something to work towards, we're all purpose oriented. And when you give people that drive, it just shows in all areas of their life. It's pretty cool to see.
How can people reach out to you if they want to connect?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm fine with people contacting me via cell phone. My number is 210-760-8324. I'm also on email, jhillhouse@cibolotx.gov. Like I said, the fire service is evolving so rapidly. Just with the 10 years that I've been in, seeing the why come to the forefront, right? We're teaching things now that I was not learning about 10 years ago, and it's a beautiful thing to see, and it's a lot of it's data, it's facts, it's things that are actually making us better on the job, right? Stuff like that. And then, of course, these soft leadership skills are so important, and if anyone ever has stuff they want to reach out to me about, I'm always a phone call away.
I appreciate you spending the time talking to me tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.